Close your eyes and let the warmth of the desert sun settle upon your skin. You are standing on the banks of the eternal Nile, where the water flows like liquid sapphire through the golden sands of Egypt. In the distance, the colossal statues of a king gaze across the horizon with timeless eyes. This is the realm of Ramesses the Great, the Pharaoh of Pharaohs, whose name was carved into the very bones of the earth. You feel the gentle evening breeze carrying the scent of lotus flowers and ancient incense. As the sky turns to a deep violet, you begin a journey back through 3,000 years of history. You walk alongside the living God who built cities of light and commanded the sun itself to bow. Prepare to drift into a world of myth as you follow the footsteps of the greatest ruler of all time. Close your eyes and feel the warmth of a sun that has burned for thousands of years. You are standing on the silty banks of the Nile River, the lifeblood of a civilization that feels as eternal as the stars themselves. The water is a deep, churning brown, rich with the soil of the south, carrying the promise of life to the desert sands. Around you, the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the sweet, heavy perfume of blue lotus flowers blooming at the water's edge. You hear the rhythmic splash of wooden oars and the distant, melodic call of a fisherman singing to his nets. This is the heart of the world. This is the Egypt of the 19th dynasty, a time of rebirth and rising power. You begin to walk away from the river, your feet sinking slightly into the cooling mud before you find the solid stone of a rising causeway. You are heading toward the Great Green, the lush delta of the north, where the city of Avaris stands. This is not the ancient, dusty capital of the south, but a place of vibrant growth and military strength. The year is roughly 1303 before the Common Era. The air here is different than in the narrow valleys of Upper Egypt. It is salty, carried on a breeze from the Mediterranean Sea, and it hums with the energy of a family that has only recently claimed the double crown of the two lands. As you walk through the monumental gates of the palace, the shadows of massive sandstone pillars fall across your shoulders, providing a brief respite from the golden heat. You pass through courtyards where the walls are painted in brilliant shades of turquoise, ochre, and deep cinnabar red. The images depict the gods reaching out to touch the pharaohs, offering them the sign of life and the scepter of power. This is the home of the Ramesses family, a line of warriors who have stepped into the vacuum left by the end of a long and storied bloodline. They are not the descendants of the ancient kings of old, but men of the chariot and the bow, men who have risen through the ranks of the army to command the fate of millions. You move deeper into the heart of the palace, where the sound of the wind is replaced by the soft, rhythmic clacking of loom weights and the hushed whispers of servants. You find yourself standing outside a chamber draped in fine linen curtains that flutter in the breeze. Inside, a child is about to be born. This is not just any child. This is the grandson of the first Ramesses and the son of the reigning king, Seti I. His mother, Queen Tuia, rests within, surrounded by the statues of Biz, the protector of households, and Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess who watches over mothers and infants. Imagine the tension in the air. The dynasty is young, and its future rests on the survival of a healthy heir. The priests have been chanting prayers since the sun first touched the horizon, burning incense that fills the room with the sharp, woody scent of frankincense and the spicy sweetness of myrrh. When the first cry of the infant finally rings out, it is a sound that echoes through the halls and ripples out across the entire kingdom. The Sun Prince has arrived. He is given the name Ramesses, which means Ra has fashioned him. It is a name that carries the weight of the sun god himself, a promise that this boy will be a reflection of the divine light on earth. You watch as the young prince grows, not in the isolation of a distant court, but in the vibrant, bustling atmosphere of a military household. His grandfather, the old General Paramessu who became Ramesses I, had established a legacy of strength. His father, Seti, is a man of iron will and artistic vision. You see the young Ramesses walking through the palace gardens, trailing his fingers in the cool water of stone basins where golden carp swim lazily beneath the lily pads. He is a child of the Delta, comfortable in the marshlands and the training grounds alike. His education is rigorous, and you follow him as he enters the House of Life, the sacred library and school attached to the temple. Here, the air is dry and smells of old papyrus and cedar wood. You sit beside him as he learns to hold the reed pen, dipping it into cakes of black and red ink. You see him trace the complex symbols of the hieroglyphs, learning that words have the power to create reality. He studies the stories of the gods, the cycles of the stars, and the ancient records of kings who ruled for centuries before his family was even known. He is taught that a pharaoh is not just a ruler, but the high priest of every temple and the supreme commander of every soldier. He must be the mediator between the divine and the mundane, the one who maintains the cosmic balance of truth and order. But the young prince is not just a scholar. You follow him to the dusty plains outside the city, where the sound of thundering hooves and the clatter of wood on stone fills the air. This is the heart of the Egyptian war machine. Ramesses watches his father, Seti, standing tall in a gilded chariot, the reins tied around his waist so his hands are free to draw a massive composite bow. You feel the vibration in the ground as the chariots sweep past in a whirlwind of dust and speed. The young prince learns to drive these vehicles of war before he is even fully grown. He learns the strength of the horses, the balance required to stand steady on a moving platform, and the focus needed to strike a target while moving at a full gallop. You see him sitting with the veteran generals in the evening, the orange light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the maps spread out on low tables. They speak of the Hittites in the north, a growing empire that threatens Egypt's interests in the Levant. They speak of the Libyans in the west and the Nubians in the south. Ramesses listens, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight. He is absorbing the geography of his future empire, learning the names of distant fortresses and the hidden paths through the mountains. As he reaches his teenage years, the relationship between father and son deepens. Seti I is a king who wants to ensure a seamless transition of power. He does not keep his son in the shadows. Instead, he elevates him. You are present when Seti declares the young Ramesses as his co-regent. The ceremony is a spectacle of gold and leopard skins. The smell of roasted meats and fresh bread wafts from the temple kitchens to feed the thousands who have gathered to witness the event. You see the prince standing beside his father, wearing the sidelock of youth, a braid of hair that marks him as a royal child, yet he is already dressed in the fine, pleated linen of a man of authority. You travel with them as they journey south to the ancient city of Thebes. The river voyage is long and peaceful, the great sails of the royal barge catching the northern wind. From the deck, you see the changing landscape of Egypt, from the wide green expanses of the delta to the narrow, rocky canyons of the south where the desert cliffs press close to the water's edge. You see the white limestone temples reflecting the noon sun, their pylons rising like mountains from the riverbank. Ramesses gazes at the monuments of the past, at the great temple of Karnak, where the forest of stone columns is so vast it feels as though it could hold up the sky itself. In Thebes, the prince is introduced to the mysteries of Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. You walk with him through the dimly lit sanctuaries, where the air is cool and still, and only the soft padding of priests' feet breaks the silence. He learns that his power comes from the divine breath of the gods, and that he has a duty to provide for them just as they provide for the land. He watches as his father commissions new works of art, carvings so deep and precise that they will survive for millennia. Ramesses learns that a king must be a builder, a creator of monuments that will shout his name to the heavens long after his body has returned to the earth. By the time he is a young man, Ramesses is already a father himself, beginning the massive family that will eventually number over 100 children. He is a man of immense physical presence, tall and strong, with a sharp nose and a confident smile. You see him in the private quarters of the palace, perhaps holding his firstborn son, Amenhotep, or standing with his beloved wife, Nefertari. There is a sense of destiny about him, a feeling that he is not just living his life, but performing a role that was written for him by the stars at the moment of his first breath. The world of his youth is one of preparation. Every hunt in the desert, every lesson in the house of life, and every diplomatic meeting at his father's side has been a thread in the tapestry of his character. He is the Sun Prince, the rising light of the 19th dynasty, and the shadow of his future greatness is already beginning to stretch across the sands of Egypt. You feel the weight of this impending history as you stand beside him on the palace balcony, looking out over the Nile as the sun begins to set, turning the water into a ribbon of liquid gold. The first breath of the Sun Prince has grown into the steady respiration of a future conqueror, a man who will become the living embodiment of Egypt itself. The world is waiting for him to step out from his father's shadow and take his place as the greatest ruler the two lands have ever known. The morning air in the city of Memphis is thick with the scent of blooming lotuses and the damp, rich earth of the Nile riverbank. You wake to the sound of distant copper chisels striking limestone, a rhythmic heartbeat that defines the era you have been born into. As a young prince, the son of the warrior king Seti I, your world is one of gold, stone, and the immense weight of expectation. You step out onto a balcony of the royal palace, feeling the cool smooth tiles beneath your bare feet. The sun, the great god Ra, is just beginning to crest over the eastern horizon, casting long, golden fingers across the valley. To your left, the river flows like a vein of molten silver, carrying the lifeblood of Egypt toward the sea. To your right, the desert begins, a vast expanse of red sand where the ancestors sleep in their eternal houses. You are not merely a child playing in the gardens. You are a student of the universe. Your education begins not with toys, but with the heavy rolls of papyrus stored in the House of Life. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat, the scent of old parchment and dried ink filling your lungs. Your teacher, a senior scribe with skin like weathered leather, watches as you dip your reed pen into a palette of black and red ink. You are learning the sacred carvings, the words of the gods. Each character you draw is more than a letter. It is a vessel of power. To write the name of a god is to call them into the room. To write the name of an enemy is to bind them. You feel the grit of the ink against the papyrus, the delicate scratch of the reed, as you master the complex geometry of the owl, the lion, and the river reed. This is your first lesson in sovereignty. A king must be a master of the word before he can be a master of the sword. But the quiet of the library is always broken by the thunder of the training grounds. You leave the shadows of the House of Life and step into the blinding glare of the afternoon sun. The air here is different. It smells of horse sweat, hot leather, and the acrid dust kicked up by spinning wheels. Your father, Seti, believes that a pharaoh who cannot defend the borders is no pharaoh at all. You stand before a golden chariot, its cedar frame light and flexible, its wheels reinforced with bronze. You are still young, yet your hands are already calloused from the reins. You climb into the car, feeling the slight sway of the suspension. The horses, two magnificent stallions with braided manes and feathered headpieces, toss their heads in anticipation. When you snap the reins, the world becomes a blur of yellow sand and blue sky. The wind whips through your linen robes, cooling the heat on your skin. You practice the art of the composite bow, standing tall in the moving chariot, finding your balance as the ground unevenly shifts beneath you. You must learn to breathe with the gallop of the horses, to release the arrow at the precise moment between heartbeats. In these moments, you are not just a prince. You are an extension of the Egyptian war machine, learning the discipline and the ferocity that your father used to reclaim the lost lands of the empire. Your father is a constant presence, a towering figure of bronze skin and piercing eyes. You watch him closely. You see him in the great hypostyle hall at Karnak, surrounded by a forest of colossal pillars that seem to hold up the very sky. Seti is a builder of dreams. He moves among the stonemasons and architects, his voice low but commanding. He teaches you that a king's duty is to the gods. If the temples are beautiful, the gods will be pleased. If the gods are pleased, the Nile will rise, the grain will grow, and the people will live in Mat, the divine order of the universe. You walk beside him through the dim, cool corridors of his great temple at Abydos. The walls are covered in the finest reliefs ever carved by human hands. You run your fingers over the stone, feeling the delicate raised edges of the figures. Your father shows you the list of kings, a long gallery of names carved into the wall. He points to the names of the ancestors, the long line of sun kings who came before you. He skips over the names of those who allowed Egypt to weaken, those who turned away from the old gods. He is teaching you about legacy. He is telling you that your name must one day be carved in stone so deep that even the desert winds cannot scrub it away. You are the shadow of his greatness, but he is preparing you to become the light that follows. By the time you reach your 10th year, the transition from child to leader begins in earnest. Seti declares you the hereditary prince and the commander of the army. This is not a hollow title. You are given your own household, your own advisors, and your own responsibilities. You begin to accompany your father on his military campaigns to the north. You trade the luxury of the palace for the canvas of a general's tent. You learn to sleep on a wooden headrest, listening to the clank of sentry spears and the low murmurs of a camp that stretches for miles. You see the reality of the world beyond the Nile. You see the rugged mountains of the Levant and the dusty plains of Syria. You witness the heat of battle, the terrifying roar of thousands of men charging across a plain, and the strategic brilliance required to outmaneuver the Hittite chariots. You watch how your father handles his generals, how he rewards loyalty with gold and punishes failure with a cold, unrelenting gaze. You are learning that power is not just given. It is maintained through a delicate balance of fear, respect, and generosity. One evening, as the sun sets over a foreign ridge, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep oranges, your father calls you to his side. You sit together outside his tent, the flickering light of a brazier casting long shadows against the sand. He speaks to you not as a king to a subject, but as a father to a son who must soon carry the world on his shoulders. He tells you about the fragility of the peace. He tells you that the enemies of Egypt are like the desert jackals, always waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. He tells you that the crown is not a piece of jewelry, but a heavy yoke. You realize in that moment that your youth is a fleeting thing. While other boys your age might be swimming in the canals or playing games in the streets of Thebes, you are being forged in the fire of statecraft. You are being taught to look at a map not as a collection of places, but as a living body that must be protected. You are being taught to look at the people not as faces, but as a responsibility to be fed and guarded. Your father takes you to the northern marshes, to the land of the eastern delta. Here, among the tall reeds and the winding waterways, he is building a new summer palace. He shows you the strategic importance of this place. It is the gateway to the east, the jumping-off point for the armies of the Pharaoh. He encourages you to take an interest in the administration of this region. You spend hours with the overseers, learning how the granaries are managed, how the taxes are collected in the form of cattle and grain, and how the justice of the king is administered in the local courts. You are becoming a diplomat as well as a warrior. You learn to listen to the grievances of the mayors and the pleas of the farmers. You learn that a king who hears his people is a king who keeps his throne. The years of your co-regency are a long, immersive masterclass in what it means to be a living god. You are present when the ambassadors from distant lands arrive, dripping in exotic perfumes and carrying gifts of lapis lazuli and silver. You watch how your father receives them, with a calculated blend of hospitality and overwhelming display of power. You see how he uses the very architecture of the palace to make them feel small, how the high ceilings and the massive statues are designed to remind every visitor that they are standing in the presence of the master of the world. As you grow taller and your shoulders broaden, the people begin to recognize you. When you ride your chariot through the streets of Memphis, they shout your name. They see in you the vigor of your father and the promise of a golden future. You are no longer just the boy in the shadow of Seti. You are the rising sun. You feel the pulse of the nation beneath your feet, a vibrant, humming energy that calls to you. The lessons are nearly complete. You have mastered the chariot. You have mastered the scribal arts. You have stood in the Holy of Holies in the greatest temples, breathing in the blue lotus incense and feeling the silent presence of the gods. You have seen blood on the battlefield and gold in the treasury. You have watched your father age, the lines on his face deepening with the burdens of the two lands. You know that the time is coming when the shadow of Seti will shorten, and you will have to stand alone in the full, blazing light of your own destiny. The weight of the double crown is no longer a theoretical concept. It is a physical sensation, a phantom pressure on your brow that never truly leaves you, even in your dreams. The world is changing, and you are the one who will shape it. You are ready to step out from the wings and onto the grand stage of history, prepared by a father who knew that only the strongest of souls could govern the eternal land of Egypt. In the quiet moments of the night, as the stars turn slowly over the pyramids, you feel the ancestors watching. They are waiting to see if you will merely be a king, or if you will truly become the great. The morning sun rises over the eastern bank of the Nile, casting a long, golden shadow from the pylons of Karnak. You stand at the threshold of a new world. The city of Thebes is no longer just a city. It is the heart of an empire, and today, it is the center of the universe. The air is thick and heavy, not just with the predictable heat of the Egyptian summer, but with the scent of blue lotus, burning myrrh, and the electric anticipation of thousands of people. You can hear them in the distance, a low hum like a swarm of bees, gathered along the riverbanks and the avenues of sphinxes. They are waiting for a transformation. You are draped in the finest white linen, so thin and delicate it feels like a second skin. It is translucent and cool against your body, held in place by a sash of gold thread. Around your neck rests a heavy collar of turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian, the weight of it a constant reminder of the station you are about to fully inhabit. Your father, the great Seti, has passed into the west. He is now a star in the firmament, navigating the duat among the gods. The mourning period has been long and solemn, but as the sun crests the horizon, the time for weeping has ended. Today, the mortal prince dies, and the living god is born. You walk slowly through the great hypostyle hall. This is a forest of stone, a place your father helped build, and now you walk between these massive columns as their sole master. The shadows here are deep and cool, smelling of damp stone and ancient dust. The chanting begins low, a rhythmic vibration that you feel in the soles of your feet before you hear it with your ears. The shaven-headed priests, dressed in leopard skins, move around you with practiced, silent grace. They carry jars of sacred Nile water, purified in the inner sanctums where only the chosen may tread. You stop before a great basin. The high priest of Amun approaches. He does not look you in the eye, for you are already beginning to shimmer with the aura of the divine. He raises a golden vessel, and the water pours over your head. It is cold, shocking, and sweet. This is the water of the Nun, the primeval ocean from which all life sprang at the beginning of time. As it washes over your skin, it cleanses the last remnants of your youth and your grief. You are being washed clean of the earth so that you may be filled with the spirit of the sun. The ritual moves to the anointing. The priests bring forward 7 alabaster jars, each containing a different sacred oil. You feel the thick, fragrant liquids being pressed into your forehead, your chest, and your palms. The scent of cedar from Lebanon and frankincense from the land of Punt fills your senses, clouding your mind in a pleasant, holy haze. This is the oil of kingship. It seals your skin, making you impenetrable to the whispers of chaos. You are becoming a vessel for Mat, the cosmic order. You are the bridge between the heavens and the black earth. Now comes the most sacred moment, the one that will echo through the centuries. The priests lead you into the darkened sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, where the statue of Amun-Ra resides in his golden bark. Here, the air is still and silent. In this darkness, the god speaks to your heart. You are not just a man taking a job. You are the son of the Creator. You are told your 5 names, the titles that will define your existence and be carved into the very bones of the earth. First is your Horus name, Kanakt Merimat, the strong bull, beloved of Mat. You feel the strength of the bull surging through your limbs, the raw power of the earth harnessed by the wisdom of the law. Then comes the 2 ladies' name, protector of Egypt and subduer of foreign lands. You feel your reach expanding, your arms stretching out to touch the borders of the world, from the cataracts of the south to the cedar forests of the north. Next is the golden Horus name, rich in years and great in victories. It is a promise of a long life, a legacy that will not fade. Then, the high priest speaks your throne name, the name by which the world will know your reign. Usamata Setipenre. Strong is the justice of Ra, chosen of Ra. The name vibrates through the stone walls. It is a title of power and divine selection. Finally, your birth name is spoken as a confirmation of your humanity joined with divinity, Ramesses Meriamun. Ramesses, beloved of Amun. Born of the sun god, loved by the king of gods. The double crown is brought forward. It is the pshent, the union of the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. As it is placed upon your head, the weight is immense. It is not just the physical weight of the gold and the fabric, but the weight of millions of souls, the weight of the harvest, the weight of the Nile's rise and fall. The cobra, the uraeus on the brow of the crown, seems to twitch with life. It is your protector, ready to spit fire at your enemies. It sits exactly above your third eye, the seat of your vision. You turn and walk back out of the darkness, moving toward the blinding light of the courtyard. As you emerge from the shadows of the temple, the roar of the crowd hits you like a physical wave. Thousands of voices cry out your names. They are not just cheering for a king. They are worshipping. To them, the sun has risen in human form. You see the faces of the common people, the farmers, the weavers, the soldiers. Their eyes are wide with awe and hope. They look at you and see the guarantee that the sun will return tomorrow, that the river will flood again, and that Egypt will remain the center of the world. You are handed the crook and the flail. The crook, the hika, to shepherd your people with care and guidance. The flail, the nekaka, to strike down those who would disturb the peace of the land. You cross them over your chest, assuming the pose of Osiris, the king of the afterlife. In this moment, you are the master of both life and death. The procession begins. You are carried on a golden litter, held aloft by the princes of the realm and the highest officials. You move through the streets of Thebes, passing the great statues of your ancestors. You look at them, the stone giants of the past, and for the first time, you do not feel like their shadow. You feel like their equal. Perhaps, you think, you might even surpass them. The incense smoke rises in thick plumes, veiling the world in a blue mist, making everything seem like a dream. The festivities will last for days. There will be wine from the delta, roasted meats from the desert fringes, and bread made from the finest emmer wheat. The people will feast in your name, and for a brief window of time, the hierarchy of the world is forgotten in a shared ecstasy of celebration. But for you, the celebration is tempered by a profound realization. As you sit upon the throne in the palace, looking out over the gardens toward the shimmering river, you realize that your life is no longer your own. You are the clock by which Egypt keeps time. Your heartbeat is the rhythm of the nation. If you are weak, the borders will crumble. If you are unjust, the rains will fail in the mountains and the river will stay in its bed. The transition is complete. The prince who raced chariots and joked with his friends has been burned away by the rituals. What remains is a monument in the flesh. You are Ramesses the Great. You are the living image of the sun, and the long, golden afternoon of your reign has only just begun. The world is waiting to see how you will carve your name into the stars. You look down at your hands, glowing in the late afternoon light, and you feel the power of the gods flowing through your veins, ready to build a world that will never be forgotten. You feel the dry heat of the Levant pressing against your skin, a different kind of heat than the heavy, rhythmic warmth of the Nile Valley. Here, the air smells of crushed cedar, dry limestone, and the sharp, metallic tang of bronze. It is the 5th year of your reign. You are young, barely in your 20s, and the weight of the blue war crown feels light upon your brow, as if it were made of feathers rather than gold and lapis lazuli. You are no longer just a builder or a prince. You are a conqueror. You are the living image of Montu, the god of war, and today the world will learn why. Behind you, the dust rises in a great golden cloud that stretches back toward the horizon. This is the army of Egypt, a force of 20,000 men divided into 4 great hosts, each named for a god. You lead the division of Amun at the very front. Behind you, separated by miles of rugged terrain, march the divisions of Ra, Ptah, and Set. You can hear the rhythmic thud of thousands of sandals hitting the earth and the constant, rhythmic jingle of chariot harnesses. It is a symphony of power, a machine of war that has not been seen on this scale for generations. Your target is Kadesh, a fortress city that sits like a locked gate at the mouth of the Orontes River. It is the key to the north, the pivot point of empires. If Kadesh falls, the Hittite Empire to the north will tremble. If it stands, your influence in these lands will crumble like dry papyrus. You lean forward in your chariot, your hands gripping the padded rail. The wood is warm from the sun. You feel the vibration of the wheels through the soles of your feet. You are confident. Perhaps, in the secret chambers of your heart, you are even a little arrogant. You have been told that the Hittite king, Muwatalli, is a coward, that he remains far to the north, terrified of your approach. Suddenly, your scouts bring 2 men before you. They are Shasu nomads, their clothes dusty and their faces weathered by the sun. They kneel in the dirt, trembling as they look up at you, the Sun King. They tell you exactly what you want to hear. They claim the Hittite army is still hundreds of miles away, lingering in the land of Aleppo because they fear the might of Ramesses. You smile. The news confirms your genius. You decide to press on, to strike quickly while the city is undefended. You leave the divisions of Ra, Ptah, and Set far behind, racing forward with only your elite Amun division to seize the prize. But as you pitch your camp on the high ground overlooking the Orontes, the atmosphere shifts. The wind carries a different scent now, something heavy and ominous. 2 more men are captured, not nomads this time, but Hittite scouts. They are brought into the center of your camp, and under the threat of the lash, the truth spills out like wine from a broken jar. The Shasu were liars. The Hittite king is not far away. He is here. He is hidden behind the mound of the city, an army of 40,000 men and 3,000 chariots waiting in the shadows. You feel a cold ripple of realization wash over you. You have walked into a trap. Before you can even shout an order, the horizon to your south explodes in a chaos of dust and bronze. The Hittite chariots, heavy and terrifying with 3 men to a cab, have crossed the river and smashed into the division of Ra as they march to join you. You watch from the heights as your 2nd division is cut in half, the survivors fleeing toward your camp in a blind panic. The sound of the impact reaches you moments later, a dull roar of wood splintering and men screaming. The panicked soldiers surge into your camp, bringing the Hittite charioteers right to your doorstep. The camp of Amun becomes a whirlwind of violence. Tents are trampled, supply wagons are overturned, and the air is filled with the whistling of arrows. Your generals are shouting, your guards are scrambling for their shields, and for a moment, the world seems to tilt on its axis. The Hittites are everywhere. They are looting your gold, they are killing your servants, and they are closing in on your royal pavilion. In this moment of absolute crisis, something inside you changes. The young king who enjoyed the luxury of the palace dies, and the warrior god is born. You do not run. You do not hide. You call for your chariot and your finest horses. Victory in Thebes and Mut is content. You don leather armor embossed with gold, and you grab your great composite bow. You are alone. Your divisions are scattered or miles away. Your bodyguards are overwhelmed. You stand in your chariot, a solitary figure against a tide of thousands. You cry out to Amun, the father of gods. Your voice thunders over the roar of the battle. You ask him where he is, if a father can truly forget his son. You remind him of the temples you have built and the monuments you have raised in his honor. And in the silence of your soul, you feel a response. A surge of cold, white fire fills your limbs. You feel as though your arms are made of bronze and your heart is a furnace. You charge. You do not charge away from the enemy, but directly into the thickest part of their line. You are a blur of motion, pulling your bowstring to your ear and releasing arrow after arrow with impossible speed. Each shaft finds a throat or a heart. The Hittites, seeing a single man charging them with the fury of a hurricane, begin to recoil. They do not see a man, they see a demon, a god clad in sunlight. You drive your chariot into their ranks, the blades on your wheels harvesting the tall grass of their infantry. You are a lion in a fold of sheep. 6 times you charge into the mass of Hittite chariots. 6 times you break their formation and force them back toward the river. The Orontes, which was clear and blue that morning, turns a dark, muddy red. Men and horses tumble into the water, drowning under the weight of their own armor. You are fighting for your life, for your crown, and for the very idea of Egypt. Just as your strength begins to fail, a miracle appears on the horizon. The Nerin, an elite force of young warriors you had sent by a different route, arrive at the perfect moment. They see their king fighting alone and let out a cry that shakes the earth. They crash into the Hittite flank like a hammer. Soon after, the division of Partar arrives, having marched through the heat at a punishing pace. By the time the sun begins to set, the tide has turned. The Hittite king, Muwatalli, watches from the safety of the city walls as his elite guard is driven back across the river. The field is yours, but it is a field of ghosts. The ground is littered with the wreckage of empires. The next morning, the air is still. A heavy mist clings to the Orontes. You sit in your chariot, your armor dented and stained, looking out over the landscape. Muwatalli sends an envoy with a message of peace. He calls you the son of Set, a warrior whose power cannot be matched. You have saved your army, but you have not taken Kadesh. The battle is a stalemate, a bloody draw that both sides will claim as a victory. But as you begin the long march back to the Nile, you realize that the truth of the battle matters less than the story of the battle. You have survived a trap that should have ended your life. You have stood alone against an empire and lived to tell of it. This will be your legend. You will carve the story of Kadesh into the stone of every temple in Egypt. You will show yourself as a giant, taller than the mountains, crushing your enemies beneath your feet. You feel the wind of the desert on your face as you cross the border back into your own land. You are no longer the untried boy who left Thebes months ago. You have tasted the copper tang of blood and the bitter dust of near defeat. You have learned that being a god king is not just about receiving offerings and wearing fine linen. It is about the will to endure when all is lost. As you approach the glittering gates of your new city, Ramesses, the people come out to meet you. They throw flower petals under the hooves of your horses. They chant your name. You look at your reflection in the polished bronze of a shield, and you see a man who has looked into the eyes of death and did not blink. The Kadesh campaign is over, but your reign has only just begun. You have decades ahead of you to build, to rule, and to ensure that the name Ramesses is whispered with or for 3,000 years. The thunder on the Orontes was just the beginning of the storm. You settle back into the cushions of your chariot, the rhythm of the road lulling you into a deep, contemplative peace. You are the master of your fate, the beloved of the gods, and the world is finally, truly, yours to command. The roar of the chariot wheels has finally begun to fade from your ears. The dust of the Levant, that fine, pale powder that seems to settle in the creases of your skin and the folds of your linen robes, is being washed away by the cool, sweet waters of the Nile. You stand on a balcony in your new capital, Ramesses, the city of Ramesses, and for the first time in many years, the air does not smell of leather, bronze, and horses. It smells of blooming lotus and the damp earth of the delta. You look out over a city that you built from the ground up, a shimmering metropolis of turquoise tiles and white limestone, and you realize that the world is changing. The era of the warrior king is yielding to something new, something perhaps even more difficult to master than a charging Hittite battalion. You are entering the season of the diplomat. You remember the heat of Kadesh, the way the sun turned your armor into an oven, and the terrifying sight of the Hittite king, Muwatalli, watching from across the Orontes River. For 15 years after that great clash, you have traded blows with the Hittites. You have marched north, and they have marched south. You have taken their forts, and they have reclaimed them as soon as your back was turned. It was a dance of giants, a stalemate that drained the treasuries and wearied the hearts of both empires. But the world does not stand still. From the east, a new shadow has begun to lengthen. The Assyrians are rising, their power growing like a storm on the horizon, threatening both Egypt and the land of Hatti. You sit in your private audience chamber. The floor is made of polished malachite, cool beneath your feet. Beside you, Queen Nefertari moves with a grace that seems to calm the very air. She is not just your wife, she is your partner in this great gamble. She has been writing letters of her own, feminine and firm, to the Hittite queen Puduhepa. While you and the new Hittite king, Hattusili III, have been testing each other's strength, your queens have been weaving a web of sisterhood. You realize now that a kingdom is not held together by the sword alone, but by the words written on papyrus and the promises made in the dark. The day of the great arrival has come. You are seated upon your throne of electrum and cedar. The doors of the great hall swing open, and the light of the Egyptian sun pours in, blindingly bright. Down the long central aisle walk the Hittite envoys. They are men of the mountains, dressed in heavy woolens and pointed boots that seem out of place in the humid warmth of the delta. They carry a heavy object wrapped in purple-dyed cloth. As they approach, the court falls into a silence so profound you can hear the rustle of the palm fronds in the gardens outside. They kneel before you, and with a slow, deliberate motion, they unveil their gift. It is not gold. You have gold beyond counting. It is not grain or cattle. It is a tablet of solid silver. It glimmers with a soft, moonlight radiance that makes the golden idols around the room seem gaudy by comparison. You step down from your dais, your sandals clicking softly on the stone, and you run your fingers over the surface of the silver. It is cold to the touch. It is engraved with cuneiform script, the wedge-shaped markings of the north, and next to them, the elegant, flowing shapes of your own Egyptian hieroglyphs. This is the Silver Treaty. It is the first document of its kind in the history of the world. It is not a record of a conquest or a list of demands from a victor to the vanished. It is a covenant of equals. You look at the words and feel their weight. They speak of a peace that shall last forever. They speak of an alliance where an attack on one is an attack on both. They speak of the extradition of refugees and the protection of merchants. But most importantly, they speak of brotherhood. Hattusili calls you his brother, and you, in your heart, find that you are ready to call him the same. You think of the thousands of men who fell at Kadesh, their blood soaking into the thirsty soil of Syria. This silver plate is their monument. It is the realization that two great powers can coexist, that the world is large enough for both the hawk of Egypt and the storm god of the Hittites. You look at the signatures of the gods at the bottom of the text. 1,000 gods of Hatti and 1,000 gods of Egypt are called to witness this oath. If anyone breaks this covenant, the gods will destroy their house and their land. But if they keep it, the gods will grant them health and long life. You feel a sense of immense relief wash over you, a tension leaving your shoulders that has been there since you were a crown prince. The celebrations that follow are unlike anything Ramesses has ever seen. For weeks, the city is a kaleidoscope of cultures. Egyptian priests in their leopard skins walk alongside Hittite officials in their high hats. You feast on honey cakes and roasted meats, and the wine of the delta flows as freely as the river itself. But the treaty is only the beginning. To truly seal this bond, to make the silver words become flesh and blood, a marriage is proposed. You are a man of many years now, your hair turning the color of the desert at dawn, but your appetite for life has not diminished. Hattusili offers you his eldest daughter, a princess of the Hittite royal house. You agree, and the preparations begin. You imagine her journey, leaving the rugged, pine-scented mountains of Anatolia, traveling through the dusty plains of Canaan, and finally reaching the lush, green embrace of the Nile. On the day she is set to arrive, the sky is heavy with dark, brooding clouds. It is the winter season, and a rare, cold rain begins to fall. Your courtiers whisper that it is a bad omen, a sign that the gods of the north are bringing their storms to drown the Egyptian sun. You stand at the gates of the city, your cloak wrapped tightly around you, watching the horizon. And then, as the Hittite caravan appears, a line of chariots and colorful tents moving through the mist, the clouds suddenly part. The sun bursts through with a ferocity that turns the raindrops into falling diamonds. The heat returns in an instant, warming the damp earth. You smile to yourself. The gods are not fighting, they are greeting one another. The princess is brought before you. Her name is given as Martha-Neferu, a name that honors the beauty of the sun. She is veiled, but when she steps out of her litter, you see the strength in her posture. She has the blood of the mountain kings in her veins. When she lifts her veil, you see a face that is strange and beautiful, a blend of features that speaks of a world beyond your borders. You take her hand, and in that moment, the piece is no longer just words on a silver plate. It is the warmth of her skin against yours. It is the blending of two dynasties. You install her in the palace at Ghurab, a beautiful retreat near the fair oasis. You fill her life with the finest linens, the most fragrant oils, and the jewelry of the pharaohs. She becomes a symbol of the new world you have built. She is the living bridge between two empires. People travel from all over the kingdom just to catch a glimpse of the Hittite queen, the woman who turned enemies into brothers. As the years pass, the peace holds. The borders are quiet. The gold that was once spent on chariots and mercenaries is now spent on temples and monuments. You watch as your architects design pylons that reach for the clouds and statues that will defy the passage of time. You realize that your greatest victory was not the charge at Kadesh, where you fought with the fury of a god. Your greatest victory was the moment you took the stylus in hand and agreed to stop the killing. You spend your evenings walking through the gardens of Pharaoh Ramesses. The air is thick with the scent of jasmine and the sound of the harp. You think of Hattusili in his cold mountain capital, perhaps also walking in a garden, looking at the same stars that hang over the Nile. You are both old men now, survivors of a violent age. You have outlived your rivals and your friends. You have seen the world break and then watched as it was mended by silver and marriage. You feel a profound sense of accomplishment. The empire is stable, the people are fed, and the gods are honored. You have moved beyond the need for conquest. You are no longer just a king who takes, you are a king who sustains. The silver tablet is kept in a secure place, but its influence is everywhere. It is in the laughter of the children who do not know the sound of a war trumpet. It is in the heavily laden merchant ships that sail the Mediterranean without fear of pirates or hostile fleets. The sun begins to set over the Nile, casting a long, golden path across the water. You sit on a bench of carved basalt and close your eyes. The world is at peace. The covenant written in silver has become the foundation of your legacy. You are Ramesses the Great, not just because of the battles you won, but because of the peace you had the courage to create. You listen to the heartbeat of Egypt, a slow, steady rhythm that matches your own. You are the master of a quiet land, and as the shadows lengthen, you find that the silence of peace is the most beautiful music you have ever heard. The air is changing now. As you travel north, leaving behind the dry, golden heat of Thebes and the ancient echoes of the Valley of the Kings, the world begins to soften. The sharp edges of the desert cliffs recede, replaced by a horizon that seems to melt into an endless sea of green. You are moving toward the cradle of your family, toward the lush, humid embrace of the Nile Delta. Here, the river does not flow in a single, mighty vein, but branches out like the veins of a lotus leaf, reaching for the great green sea. This is the land of your ancestors, the rugged men of the Delta who rose to power through strength and will. And here, in this fertile landscape, you have birthed a dream into reality. You have built a city that the world has never seen before, a place that glimmers like a fallen star nestled among the reeds. You stand at the prow of your royal barge as it glides through the Pelusiac branch of the Nile. The water here is deep and slow, its surface patterned with the broad, flat leaves of white lilies. As the sun begins its descent, casting a honeyed glow over the marshlands, the silhouette of your creation rises from the mist. It is Pharaoh Ramesses, the house of Ramesses, greater victories. To the merchants who travel from the distant shores of the Hittites and the islands of the sea, it is known by another name. They call it the Turquoise City. As your vessel draws closer to the massive stone quays, the first thing that strikes you is the color. In Thebes, the world is the color of sandstone and granite, grounded in the earth. But here, you have commanded the sun to dance upon the sky. Every wall, every pylon, and every gateway is adorned with tiles of brilliant blue and shimmering green glaze. These are not mere decorations. They are a statement. The turquoise blue reflects the life-giving waters of the Nile and the eternal canopy of the heavens. It is the color of rebirth, the color of the goddess Ether, and as you step off the barge, the light reflecting off the glazed bricks is so bright it feels as though you are walking into a dream. The city is alive with a vibration that is different from the solemnity of the south. Here, the air smells of salt from the nearby sea, mixed with the heavy, sweet scent of blooming jasmine and the earthy musk of the river mud. You walk through the streets, and the sound of the city rises to meet you. It is a symphony of progress. You hear the rhythmic clinking of copper chisels against limestone, the deep rumble of chariot wheels over paved roads, and the melodic chatter of a dozen different languages. Because this city sits at the gateway to the east, it is a melting pot of the known world. You see merchants from the Levant in their colorful fringed robes, Libyans with their intricate tattoos, and tall, dark-skinned sailors from the southern reaches of Kush. They all bow as you pass, but there is an energy of movement here that does not pause for long. Pharaoh Ramesses is a city that never sleeps, a city built for a pharaoh who is always looking toward the horizon. You guide your steps toward the great temple of Set. While the rest of Egypt may look upon the god of storms and chaos with a measure of fear, here in the delta, he is a patron of your house. Your father, Seti, bore his name, and you honor the fierce strength that Set represents. The temple is a forest of columns, each one carved to resemble the stalks of papyrus, but instead of the muted tones of old stone, they are vibrant with paint. Deep reds, brilliant yellows, and that ever-present, shimmering turquoise. Within these walls, you feel the power of the storm, the raw energy that allowed you to hold the line at Kadesh and to bring the world to its knees. But as you move deeper into the city, past the military barracks where thousands of your elite chariot warriors groom their horses and sharpen their spears, you find a different kind of beauty. You enter the district of the royal palaces, a sprawling complex of villas, gardens, and lakes that seems to defy the very laws of nature. You walk through a gateway flanked by two colossal statues of yourself, carved from red granite. They tower 70 feet into the air, their eyes fixed on the distance, guarding the entrance to your private world. The palace of Pharaoh Ramesses is a labyrinth of light. You walk through high-ceilinged halls where the walls are covered in faience tiles depicting the lush life of the marshes. You see images of blue ducks taking flight from papyrus thickets, fish shimmering in clear water, and lions prowling through the high grass. The floors are painted to look like the river itself, so that as you walk, it feels as if you are treading upon the surface of the Nile. The air here is kept cool by the ingenious design of the high windows, which catch the northern breezes coming off the Mediterranean and funnel them through the corridors. You find yourself in a private courtyard, far from the business of the court and the demands of the empire. Here, a rectangular pool reflects the sky, its surface broken only by the occasional ripple of a golden carp. Around the pool are trees that have been brought from the farthest corners of the earth. There are pomegranate trees with their bursting red fruit, fragrant cedars from Lebanon, and delicate olive trees from the lands of the north. This is your sanctuary. This is where you come to remember that you are not just a god on earth, but a man who loves the beauty of the living world. You sit on a cedar chair inlaid with ivory and gold, and for a moment, you simply listen. You can hear the distant sound of your children playing in a nearby garden. You have many sons and many daughters, more than any pharaoh before you, and their laughter is the heartbeat of this city. They are the future of your bloodline, the living legacy of the House of Ramesses. In this city of turquoise, you are not just building monuments for the dead, you are building a home for the living. As the evening deepens, the city begins to glow. Thousands of oil lamps are lit, their small flames reflected in the glazed tiles of the buildings, turning the streets into rivers of flickering light. From the high balconies of your palace, you look out over the delta. You can see the lights of the harbors, where ships are being loaded with grain and linen to be sent across the sea. You can see the silhouettes of the great granaries, filled to bursting with the wealth of the land. And you can see the white limestone walls of the villas of your officials, stretching out toward the horizon. This city is your pride. It is a bridge between the ancient traditions of Egypt and the new world you are forging. It is a fortress that guards your borders, a warehouse that feeds your people, and a jewel that reflects your glory. You have chosen this place not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. By moving the capital here, to the very edge of your empire, you have told the world that you are a pharaoh who does not hide behind the mountains of the south. You are a pharaoh who stands at the front, who meets the world with open eyes and a steady hand. You feel a cool breeze brush against your face, carrying the scent of the sea and the damp earth of the delta. It is a refreshing contrast to the dry heat of the desert. Here, the land is always renewing itself. Every year, the inundation brings new life, and every year, your city grows stronger. You think of the great green sea, just a short journey to the north, and the vast world that lies beyond it. You have made peace with the Hittites, your greatest rivals, and now the turquoise city serves as a beacon of that peace. It is a place where former enemies now meet as diplomats and traders, walking the same blue-tiled streets that you once envisioned in your youth. You walk back into the palace, your footsteps echoing softly on the painted floors. The walls seem to pulse with a soft, blue light, a reflection of the enduring spirit of the land. You pass by a wall where the artists are still at work, adding the final details to a scene of a royal festival. They look up and bow, their eyes full of reverence, but you gesture for them to continue. You find a quiet joy in seeing the city continue to evolve, even as you rest. As you prepare for sleep, the sounds of Ramesses begin to settle into a low, rhythmic hum. The clatter of the day fades into the gentle chirping of crickets in the palace gardens and the distant, rhythmic splashing of the river against the quays. You lie down on your bed of fine linen, the air around you scented with myrrh and the cooling breeze of the night. You are the master of the turquoise city, the lord of the delta, and the guardian of the horizon. In the stillness of the night, surrounded by the shimmering beauty of your creation, you find a profound sense of belonging. This is the house you built, the legacy you have carved into the very soil of your ancestors, and as you close your eyes, the blue light of the turquoise city lingers in your mind, a promise of a future as bright and eternal as the Egyptian sky. The river beneath your boat has changed. The lush, emerald-green banks of the north have slowly surrendered to a landscape of raw, golden power. You are traveling deep into the heart of Nubia, far to the south of the great capital of Thebes. Here, the Nile narrows, hemmed in by towering cliffs of sandstone that seem to burn under the relentless African sun. The air is different here. It is drier, thinner, and carries the scent of ancient dust and sun-baked stone. As your vessel glides silently against the current, you feel the weight of the wilderness pressing in from all sides. This is a land of extremes, a frontier where the world of man meets the eternal silence of the desert. You stand at the prow of the boat, shielding your eyes against the glare reflecting off the water. 4 days, you have seen little but the undulating dunes and the jagged silhouettes of the mountains. But then, as the river makes a wide, sweeping turn, the mountain itself seems to wake up. You catch your breath. There, carved directly into the living rock of the western bank, are the 4 giants. They sit in profound, eternal silence, for colossal versions of Ramesses the Great, staring out across the water toward the rising sun. Even from a distance, their scale is impossible to comprehend. They are not merely statues placed against a cliff. They are the cliff. They are the mountain transformed into the likeness of a god. As your boat draws closer to the shore, the sheer audacity of the vision begins to settle into your bones. You realize that you are not just looking at a temple. You are looking at a declaration of absolute, divine authority. You step off the boat and onto the soft, hot sand. Your sandals sink slightly as you begin the walk toward the great temple. The heat is a physical presence, a heavy cloak draped over your shoulders, but the sight before you draws you forward with an almost magnetic pull. The four-seated figures of the king tower 65 feet into the air. To stand at their feet is to feel your own insignificance. You look up, and the head of the pharaoh is so high above you that it seems to touch the very vault of the sky. His face is calm, his eyes fixed on the horizon with a look of serene, unwavering confidence. This is the face of a man who does not merely rule the earth, but who commands the heavens. You notice the smaller figures carved around the legs of the giants. These are his daughters, his sons, and his beloved wife, Nefertari. Even in their smaller scale, they are larger than life, gathered around the feet of the great ancestor like children seeking shade. Above the entrance, a niche holds the image of Ra-Horikti, the sun god, merging the identity of the king with the light of the world. It is a masterclass in propaganda, a warning to any who would enter Egypt from the south that they are entering the domain of a living god. You move toward the dark rectangle of the entrance, leaving the blinding white light of the desert behind. As you cross the threshold, the temperature drops instantly. The air inside is cool, still, and smells of dry stone and the faint, lingering phantom of incense. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the dimness. As the shadows retreat, you find yourself standing in a massive hall. 8 towering pillars line the way, 4 on each side. These are not standard columns. Each one is carved into the shape of the king himself, standing in the form of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. His arms are crossed over his chest, holding the crook and the flail. He looks down at you from the shadows, his face mirrored 8 times in the flickering light of your torch. The scale of the room makes you feel as though you have entered the hall of a mountain king from a legend. The walls around you are alive with movement. You move your light across the carved reliefs, and the history of a dynasty unfolds. Here is the chaos of the Battle of Kadesh. You see the charging chariots, the frantic energy of the horses, and the king standing alone against a sea of enemies. The carvings are so deep, so detailed, that you can almost hear the roar of the crowd and the clash of bronze. Every inch of the stone tells a story of triumph, of order overcoming chaos. It is a record of a life lived at the very center of the universe. You walk deeper into the mountain, passing through a second, smaller pillared hall. The atmosphere becomes even more heavy, more sacred. You are moving away from the world of men and toward the heart of the divine. The chambers grow smaller, the ceilings lower, focusing your attention forward. Finally, you reach the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. It is a small, square room at the very back of the temple, buried deep within the rock. Here, seated on a bench carved from the same mountain, are 4 figures. They are Ptah, the creator god, Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, Ramesses the deified king, and Ra-Horikti, the son of the horizon. They sit in the dark, waiting. You think of the incredible engineering required to create this moment. Twice a year, on the 22nd of February and the 22nd of October, the rising sun aligns perfectly with the entrance of the temple. The first rays of light pierce through the dark halls, traveling 200 feet into the mountain to wash over the statues in the sanctuary. The light illuminates the faces of Amun-Ra and Ramesses, crowning them with fire, while Ptah, the god of the underworld, remains forever in the shadows. It is a miracle of light and stone, a bridge between the celestial and the earthly. You stand in that sacred space, imagining the golden glow filling the room, and you feel the connection between the pharaoh and the sun that sustained his world. But the mountain has more to tell you. You leave the great temple and walk a short distance across the sand to a second, smaller temple. This is the temple of Uther and Nefertari. While the great temple is a monument to power and divinity, this place feels different. It is more intimate, though no less grand. On the facade, 6 standing statues are carved into the rock. For the first time in Egyptian history, the queen is depicted at the same height as the king. Nefertari stands tall, flanked by Ramesses, her presence etched into the mountain with equal weight. This is a monument to a profound partnership, a tribute to the woman who was the light of his life. You enter the smaller temple, and the atmosphere is lighter. The pillars here are topped with the face of Atha, the goddess of love, joy, and music. Her large, cow-like ears and gentle smile give the hall a feeling of warmth and protection. The walls show scenes of the queen offering flowers and incense to the goddesses. There is a sense of grace here, a softness that balances the raw power of the great temple next door. You can almost hear the faint sound of the sistrum, the sacred rattle of Atha, echoing through the stone chambers. You spend a long time in the presence of Nefertari, reflecting on the man who built these wonders. Ramesses was a conqueror, a builder, and a god, but here in the sands of Nubia, he also left a record of his heart. He carved his love for his queen into the very bones of the earth, ensuring that her name would be whispered by the wind for as long as the mountains stood. As the afternoon sun begins to dip lower in the sky, you walk back out onto the sand. The shadows of the 4 giants are stretching long and thin across the desert floor. The sandstone of the cliff is turning a deep, fiery orange, glowing with a warmth that seems to come from within. The Nile, far below, has turned to liquid gold. You sit on a rock near the water's edge and look back at the temples. From here, they look like sentinels, guarding the southern gate of the empire. They have stood here for over 3,000 years, watching the river flow, watching the rise and fall of civilizations, and watching the stars wheel overhead. They are a testament to what the human spirit can achieve when it is driven by a vision of eternity. The wind picks up, swirling a fine mist of sand around the ankles of the stone kings. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the silence of the desert. It is not an empty silence, but a full one, resonant with the echoes of the thousands of workers who labored here, the priests who chanted in the dark, and the pharaoh who stood where you are standing now, looking up at his own reflection in the stone. You realize that Abu's symbol was not just built to impress the living. It was built to endure until the end of time. It was a bridge to the afterlife, a way for Ramesses to ensure that his name would never be forgotten, and that his soul would always have a home in the land of his ancestors. As the first stars begin to blink into existence in the violet sky, you feel a deep sense of peace. The scale of the world, the depth of history, and the beauty of the desert have all combined to quiet your mind. You watch as the moonlight begins to silver the faces of the giants, their features softening in the cool light of the evening. They will be here tonight, and tomorrow, and for countless tomorrows to come, watching over the river, waiting for the sun to rise again. The journey south has brought you to the edge of the world, and in doing so, it has brought you closer to the heart of the man who shaped it. You leave the temples behind, but their image remains etched in your mind, a memory of stone and light, of power and love, standing eternal against the shifting sands of time. The river calls you back, its gentle pulse a reminder that the story continues, flowing ever onward through the landscape of the past. As you step back onto your boat, the memory of the giants follows you, a silent promise of a legacy that refuses to fade. You find yourself standing on the gentle curve of the Nile as the heat of the day begins to soften into a golden haze. The air is thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the damp, sweet earth that clings to the riverbanks. You are no longer looking at the colossal statues that dominate the landscape of the great pharaoh. Instead, your gaze is drawn to something more intimate, something that speaks of a different kind of power. This is the story of the woman who walked beside the sun, the one whom Ramesses loved above all others. You walk along a path lined with tall, swaying papyrus reeds. The sound of the river is a low hum, a constant heartbeat that has echoed through these lands for thousands of years. As you move forward, you see a figure standing near the water. She is draped in fine, pleated linen that seems to catch the fading light of the afternoon. Her name is Nefertari. In the ancient language, her name means the most beautiful, or the one for whom the beauty of the world was made. You watch as she moves with a grace that seems to command the very air around her. She is not just a queen in name. She is a partner to the great Ramesses, a woman of intellect and diplomacy who helped shape the empire. You can almost hear the soft clinking of her golden jewelry, the sound of heavy necklaces and bracelets that mark her status. But as you look closer, you see more than just the trappings of royalty. You see the wisdom in her eyes and the strength in her posture. You follow her as she walks toward a smaller but no less magnificent structure. This is her temple, carved into the living rock of the cliffside at Abu Simbel. It stands just a short distance from the massive temple of her husband. As you approach the entrance, you notice something truly remarkable. In most of the monuments of this time, the statues of the queen are small, barely reaching the knees of the pharaoh. But here, Nefertari stands tall. Her statues are the same size as those of Ramesses. This was an unprecedented gesture of love and respect. It tells you that in the eyes of the great pharaoh, she was his equal. You step into the cool shadows of her temple. The air inside is still and carries the faint, ancient scent of incense and stone. The walls are covered in vibrant reliefs that tell the story of her divinity. You see her standing before the goddess Atha, receiving the crown of the queen. You see her offering lotus flowers to the gods, her hands raised in a gesture of eternal devotion. The colors are still vivid, deep blues made from ground lapis lazuli and rich ochres that echo the desert sands outside. You feel a sense of peace here. It is a place of beauty and quiet reflection. You move deeper into the sanctuary, where the light of the sun reaches only at certain times of the year to illuminate the figures of the gods. You can imagine Ramesses standing here, looking at the image of his wife and calling her by the name he wrote for her in stone. He called her the one for whom the sun shines. It is a title that captures the depth of his devotion. You leave the temple and find yourself transported to a different landscape. You are now in the Valley of the Queens, a secluded place tucked away in the rugged hills of the West Bank. The ground beneath your feet is dusty and pale, reflecting the intense light of the sky. You walk toward a small opening in the hillside, a doorway that leads deep into the earth. This is the entrance to the tomb of Nefertari, perhaps the most beautiful tomb ever discovered in Egypt. As you descend the stone steps, the temperature drops. The air becomes crisp and silent. You are leaving the world of the living and entering a realm of eternal color. When you reach the bottom of the stairs, you gasp at what you see. The walls are not just painted. They are alive. Every inch of the limestone is covered in scenes of such exquisite detail that they take your breath away. You walk through the first chamber, and you see Nefertari playing a game of senet. She sits on a carved chair, her hand reaching out to move a piece across the board. She is playing for her soul, negotiating her passage into the afterlife with a calm and steady focus. Above her, the ceiling is a deep, midnight blue, covered in thousands of golden stars. It feels as though you are standing under the night sky of the ancient world, protected by the celestial canopy. You move into the next room, and you see her being led by the gods. The goddess Isis takes her by the hand, guiding her toward the underworld. The colors are so fresh they look as if the artists finished their work only yesterday. You see the delicate lines of her kohl-rimmed eyes and the intricate patterns of her feathered headdress. The scenes depict her journey through the gates of the afterworld, passing through the trials and challenges that lead to eternal life. You notice the presence of the goddess Selkit, the protector of the dead, with a scorpion perched atop her head. She watches over Nefertari with a steady gaze. You feel the weight of the history around you, the thousands of hours of labor that went into creating this sanctuary for a woman who was loved beyond measure. The tomb is not a place of sadness. It is a celebration of a life lived in the light. You sit for a moment on the floor of the tomb, surrounded by these ancient stories. You think about the letters Nefertari wrote to the Hittite queen, Puduhipa. In a world of war and conquest, these two women exchanged messages of peace and friendship. They called each other sisters and sent gifts of jewelry and fine cloth. Nefertari was a bridge between nations, a diplomat who used her influence to bring stability to the region. She was more than just a beautiful face in the court. She was a force of nature. You can imagine the sound of her voice, soft but firm, as she dictated those letters to the scribes. You can imagine her walking through the lush gardens of the palace at Ramesses, discussing the affairs of the state with her husband. Theirs was a partnership built on mutual respect. When she died, the grief of the pharaoh was immense. He built this tomb as a final gift, a house of eternity where her beauty would never fade. You stand up and begin to walk back toward the entrance of the tomb. As you climb the stairs, the bright light of the Egyptian sun begins to spill back into your vision. You emerge into the warmth of the valley, the golden hills stretching out around you. The memory of the vibrant colors in the tomb stays with you, a vivid contrast to the monochromatic desert. You think about the phrase again, the one for whom the sun shines. It is a reminder that even the most powerful man in the world was humbled by his love for a single person. You walk back toward the river, the path leading you through the groves of date palms and acacias. The wind rustles through the leaves, sounding like 1,000 whispered secrets from the past. You reach the banks of the Nile as the sun begins its final descent toward the horizon. The water is a mirror of orange and violet. You see the traditional wooden boats, the feluccas, gliding silently across the surface, their white sails catching the last of the light. You feel a deep sense of connection to this place and to the people who once walked these shores. You understand now that the legacy of Ramesses the Great is not just measured in the size of his monuments or the number of his battles. It is also found in the quiet corners of a temple dedicated to his wife. It is found in the brushstrokes of a tomb hidden in the valley. It is found in the enduring story of a love that was written in stone so that it might never be forgotten. You sit down on the riverbank and watch as the first stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. They match the stars you saw on the ceiling of the tomb. You feel the coolness of the evening air on your skin. The world is quiet now, the bustle of the day replaced by the gentle sounds of the night. You are filled with a sense of wonder and peace. The story of Nefertari is a story of light. It is a story of a woman who shone so brightly that she illuminated the life of a king and the history of an entire civilization. As you close your eyes and listen to the water lapping against the shore, you can almost feel the warmth of that light still reaching out across the centuries. It is a steady, guiding glow that tells you that beauty and love are as much a part of history as any war or empire. You let the rhythm of the river lull you into a state of deep relaxation. The golden light of the afternoon has turned into the silver light of the moon. The monuments of the past stand as silent sentinels in the dark, their stories etched into the very bones of the earth. You are part of this landscape now, a witness to the enduring power of the human spirit. You think of the artisans who worked by candlelight to paint the walls of the Queen's tomb. You think of the stonemasons who carved her likeness into the cliffs of Abu Simbel. Their devotion to their craft was a reflection of the pharaoh's devotion to his queen. Every line and every color was an act of remembrance. You feel the weight of your body pressing into the soft sand of the riverbank. You are tired, but it is a good, peaceful tiredness. The journey through the life of Ramesses and Nefertari has been a long one, and you have seen both the grand scale of the gods and the intimate details of the heart. You are ready to let the world of the past drift away, leaving you with the quiet beauty of the present. The sun has set, but for Nefertari, it will always shine. Her name will always be spoken in the halls of history, a testament to the idea that the greatest power of all is the power of the one who brings light into the world. You breathe in the cool night air and exhale slowly, letting go of any remaining tension. The river continues its journey to the sea, and you continue your journey into sleep, carried by the soft whispers of the ancient world. You find yourself standing on a high balcony overlooking the city of Ramesses, the great capital built by the king who has now ruled for more than 6 decades. The air here is different than it was in the vibrant, energetic years of his youth. It is heavier, filled with the golden, hazy quality of a late summer afternoon that seems to stretch on forever. The sun is a deep, bruised orange, hanging low over the horizon, casting shadows that are long and thin across the limestone streets below. You can hear the distant, rhythmic sound of the Nile as it pulses against the stone quays, a heartbeat that has matched the rhythm of this king's life for 66 years. To live in Egypt at this moment is to live in a world that has forgotten what it is like to have any other ruler. You walk through the marketplace and you see grandmothers who were children when he first took the throne. You see soldiers who have spent their entire careers serving under his banner, never knowing the name of another sovereign. For the people of this land, Ramesses II is not merely a man. He has become a constant of nature, as reliable as the annual flooding of the river or the rising of the sun. He is the living manifestation of the land itself, and as he has aged, the land has seemed to age with him, settled into a peaceful, almost stagnant prosperity. You turn away from the view of the city and walk back into the cool, shaded interior of the palace. The walls are thick, keeping out the desert heat, and the air smells of expensive kaifi incense, a mixture of honey, wine, raisins, and myrrh. As you move through the corridors, you notice that the carvings on the walls have changed over the decades. In the early sections, the king is depicted as a warrior, charging into battle at Kadesh, his muscles taut and his face youthful. But here, in the newer wings of the palace, the depictions are different. He is still majestic, still wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, but there is a stillness in his stone eyes. The artists have captured a sense of eternal authority that no longer needs to prove itself through movement. You reach the private chambers where the king spends much of his time now. You see him seated in a high-backed chair made of cedar and gold. He is a very old man, perhaps the oldest man you have ever seen. His hair, once a fiery red that marked him as a servant of the god Set, has turned to a thin, snowy white, though the court barbers still tint it with henna to preserve the memory of his vigor. His skin is like fine parchment, etched with the lines of 1,000 decisions and the weight of a century of history. You notice the way he moves his hands, slowly and with a touch of stiffness. His joints ache from the dampness of the river and the many years of riding in chariots. He suffers from the same ailments as many of his subjects, including a persistent ache in his jaw where his teeth have worn down to the gums. Yet, despite the frailty of his physical form, there is an aura around him that demands a silence so profound it feels physical. He has outlived almost everyone he ever loved. You think of the great royal wife, Nefertari, who has been resting in her magnificent tomb in the Valley of the Queens for many years. You think of his second principal wife, Isetnefret, and the many dozens of sons and daughters who have already crossed the threshold into the west. To be Ramesses at this age is to be a lonely mountain peak, standing tall while the surrounding hills have long since eroded into dust. One by one, his chosen heirs have passed away. You can see the shadow of this grief in the way he looks at the officials who enter the room. He is currently on his 13th son, a man named Merneptah, who is himself no longer young. Merneptah waits in the wings, a grey-haired prince who has spent his entire life in the shadow of a colossus. You wonder what it must be like for the prince to wait for a throne that seems as though it will never be vacant. For Ramesses, the concept of death has become a distant, almost abstract idea, even as it draws closer every day. He has held the crook and the flail for so long that they seem to have grown into his grip. In this long twilight, the king has turned his attention more and more to the ritual of the said festival. This is the ancient jubilee designed to rejuvenate the pharaoh's strength and prove his fitness to rule. You recall the stories of his first jubilee, celebrated in his 30th year on the throne. It was a time of immense celebration, of feasting and dancing and the symbolic running of the course to show the gods he was still strong. But as the years turned into decades, these festivals became more frequent. He has celebrated 14 of them now, more than any other king in the history of the world. Each time, the priests perform the sacred rites, and each time, Ramesses is symbolically reborn, his soul fused once again with the eternal spirit of the kingship. You watch as a young scribe enters the room, carrying a papyrus scroll that contains the reports from the southern borders and the Hittite lands. The peace treaty he signed so many years ago with the Hittites still holds. The world is quiet. The great wars are over. This is the peace of the late reign, a time when the borders are secure and the granaries are full. But there is a price for this longevity. The bureaucracy of the empire has become vast and slow, a tangled web of officials and priests who have spent generations building their own power bases while the king grew older in his palace. You walk with the king as he is carried on a golden palanquin out into the gardens. The motion is smooth, the servants walking with practiced grace to avoid jarring his sensitive frame. You pass by statues of the king that seem to be everywhere. He has spent the last 60 years carving his name into every available surface in Egypt. Wherever there was a temple, he added a pylon. Wherever there was an empty courtyard, he erected a colossus. You notice that he has even carved his name over the names of past kings, erasing their history to bolster his own. He is not just a ruler, he is the very definition of the kingdom. To see his face is to see Egypt. As the sun dips further, the light turns a deep, dusty purple. The king looks out toward the west, toward the desert where the sun god Ra begins his nightly journey through the underworld. In these quiet moments, the king is no longer the conqueror or the builder. He is a man who is preparing for his own journey. He has spent years overseeing the construction of his tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a sprawling underground palace of corridors and chambers that dive deep into the heart of the mountain. He has filled it with the spells of the Book of the Dead and the Book of Gates, ensuring that he has the maps and the passwords needed to navigate the dangerous paths of the afterlife. You feel a sense of profound stillness as the evening birds begin their songs in the palm trees. The long reign of Ramesses is like a great river that has slowed as it nears the sea. It has lost the turbulent energy of the rapids and the mountain falls, becoming wide and deep and silent. There is a majesty in this slowness. There is a comfort in the knowledge that things are as they have always been and as they should be. The king breathes in the cooling air, his eyes reflecting the first stars that are beginning to blink into existence in the darkening sky. You realize that for the people of this time, the end of this reign is almost unthinkable. How can the world continue when its sun finally sets? How can the Nile flow if the man who commands its rising is no longer there? But the king knows, and perhaps you know as well, that he has already achieved the only kind of immortality that truly matters. He has transformed himself into a legend while he was still alive. He has woven his name so tightly into the fabric of the world that even after the stone of his temples has crumbled to sand, the memory of his name will remain. The servants begin to light the oil lamps around the garden, their small flames flickering like captured stars. The king closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the wind rustling through the papyrus reeds. It is the sound of the world continuing, the sound of time moving forward, even when it feels as though it has stood still. You stand there in the deepening shadows, a witness to the final chapters of an era that will never be repeated. The great Ramesses, the king of kings, sits in the gathering dark, a monument of flesh and bone, waiting for the gods to call him home to the stars. The weight of the day begins to lift from your own shoulders as you watch the peaceful scene. The colors of the garden fade into shades of gray and silver under the rising moon. The air is cool now, a soft blanket that settles over the palace and the city. The long reign is not an ending, but a slow transition into a different kind of existence. You feel the pull of that ancient peace, the sense that everything is in its proper place. The king is old, the land is tired, but the spirit of Egypt is eternal. You watch the flickering lamps and feel your own breath slowing to match the quiet pulse of the night. The stories of the past are like the stars above, distant and bright, guiding you into a deep and restful sleep where the boundaries of time no longer matter and the great king watches over the world forever. The sun is dipping low toward the horizon, casting long, amber shadows across the banks of the Nile. The heat of the Egyptian day is finally beginning to soften, replaced by a gentle breeze that carries the scent of damp earth and blooming lotus flowers. You find yourself standing on the eastern bank of the great river in the city of Thebes. Around you, there is a profound silence, a stillness that seems to hold its breath. The bustling markets are quiet, the construction sites of the great temples have fallen still, and the people of Egypt are gathered in hushed clusters along the water's edge. This is the year 1213 before the Common Era, and the world is about to say its final goodbye to the man who has defined it for nearly 7 decades. Ramesses II, the great ancestor, the King of Kings, has finished his earthly journey. You look toward the river and see a grand procession beginning to form. This is the most sacred of journeys. For a pharaoh, death is not an ending, but a transition, a crossing from the land of the living in the east to the eternal realm of the west. You walk forward, your sandals pressing into the soft, cooling silt of the riverbank. You feel the weight of the moment in the very air you breathe. Ahead of you, the royal funerary barge waits. It is a vessel of magnificent craftsmanship, built of fine cedar wood brought from the forests of Lebanon. The hull is decorated with shimmering gold leaf that catches the dying light of the sun, making the boat look like a fallen star resting upon the dark waters of the Nile. As you approach the barge, you see the high priests dressed in their leopard skin robes, their heads shaved smooth and gleaming. They carry incense burners that release thick, sweet clouds of myrrh and frankincense. The smoke rises in lazy spirals toward the darkening sky, creating a bridge between the earth and the heavens. In the center of the barge rests the massive sarcophagus of Ramesses. It is protected by a golden canopy, and the figures of the goddesses Isis and Nephthys are carved at either end, their winged arms stretched out in a gesture of eternal protection. You watch as the priests carefully secure the vessel, their movements slow and deliberate, filled with a reverence that transcends time. You step onto a smaller companion boat, one of the many that will follow the king on his final voyage across the water. As the oarsmen begin their rhythmic stroke, you hear the sound of the blades dipping into the water. It is a steady, hypnotic pulse. Splash, pull, release. Splash, pull, release. The sound echoes across the river, joining with the distant, mournful wailing of the professional mourners on the shore. They cry out to the sky, their voices rising and falling like the waves, lamenting the departure of the son of Egypt. But as your boat moves further into the center of the Nile, the cries of the shore begin to fade, replaced by the soft lapping of water against the wood. The river is wide here, and the reflection of the setting sun creates a golden path that seems to lead directly into the mountains of the west. You look back at the eastern bank, where the great temples of Karnak and Luxor stand as monuments to the king's power. Their tall pylons and obelisks are silhouetted against the sky, reaching up toward the first few stars. But your focus remains on the west. In Egyptian mythology, the west is Amenti, the land of the setting sun and the entrance to the underworld. It is the place where the god Osiris reigns and where the souls of the justified go to live in the field of reeds. You watch the golden barge of Ramesses ahead of you. It moves with a grace that seems almost supernatural, as if the river itself is guiding the king toward his destiny. The sky has turned a deep shade of violet and indigo, and the first sliver of the moon appears, a silver sickle hanging over the limestone cliffs. You feel a sense of peace settling over you. The long years of war, the building of great cities, and the complex politics of the empire are all behind him now. All that remains is the soul of the man and his journey into the infinite. The boats reach the western bank, where the desert begins its long stretch toward the horizon. You step off the boat and feel the change in the atmosphere. The air here is drier, cooler, and smells of ancient stone and dust. The procession begins to move inland, winding through the rugged valleys that lead toward the secret place of the kings. You walk among the priests and the officials, the flickering light of torches illuminating the path. The shadows dance against the high canyon walls, creating shapes that look like the ancient gods watching over the king. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, seems to walk beside you in the darkness, ensuring that the path is safe. As you travel deeper into the Valley of the Kings, the silence becomes even more profound. This is a sacred landscape, hidden away from the world of the living to protect the eternal rest of the rulers of Egypt. You reach the entrance to the tomb of Ramesses, a doorway cut directly into the living rock of the mountain. It is a gateway to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The torches reveal the intricate carvings that adorn the entrance, spells and incantations from the Book of the Dead designed to guide the pharaoh through the perils of the afterlife. You enter the tomb, and the air becomes still and heavy with the scent of dried herbs and ancient masonry. The walls are covered in vibrant paintings that look as fresh as if they were painted yesterday. You see images of Ramesses standing before the gods, offering them gifts of Mat, the goddess of truth and balance. You see the celestial cow, the starry sky, and the many-headed serpents that guard the gates of the night. You follow the procession down the long, sloping corridors, descending deeper into the heart of the earth. The sound of your footsteps is muffled by the sand on the floor. Finally, you reach the burial chamber. It is a vast room, its ceiling painted a deep blue and covered in thousands of golden stars. In the center, the great sarcophagus is placed into its final resting position. The high priest steps forward, holding a ritual tool known as an adze. This is the moment of the opening of the mouth ceremony. You watch as the priest touches the face of the king's image on the sarcophagus. With this act, the senses of the deceased are symbolically restored. He will be able to breathe, to speak, to eat, and to see in the life to come. The priest recites the ancient words, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. You are pure, you are pure, you are pure. Your Ka is pure. Your Ba is pure. The ceremony is a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual one. You feel the energy in the room shift, a sense of completion and readiness. The physical body of the pharaoh, preserved with such care through the 70 days of mummification, is now a vessel for his eternal spirit. The treasures of the king are placed around him. Golden chariots, furniture of ebony and ivory, jars of fine wine, and boxes of clothing. All these things are meant to serve him in the field of reeds, a reflection of the life he loved on earth but perfected and made eternal. As the priests begin to exit the chamber, you stay for a final moment of reflection. You look at the walls one last time, seeing the king depicted in his youth, in his prime, and in his wisdom. He has crossed the river. He has entered the west. According to the myths, he will now face the weighing of the heart. He will stand in the hall of truth before Osiris and 42 divine judges. His heart, the record of his deeds, will be placed on a scale against the feather of Mat. If his heart is as light as the feather, he will be granted eternal life. For a king who spent his life upholding the order of the universe and building temples to the gods, there is no doubt of the outcome. You begin to walk back up the long corridor, moving toward the world of the living once more. As you emerge from the tomb, you see that the night has fully taken hold. The Valley of the Kings is bathed in starlight. The journey of Ramesses II is complete. He is no longer a man of flesh and blood, but a star in the firmament, a god among gods. You feel a deep sense of rest and closure. The river has been crossed, the lands of the west have been reached, and the great king is finally at peace. You walk back toward the river, the cool desert air brushing against your skin. The boats are waiting to take you back across the water to the world of the living, but you carry the stillness of the tomb with you. The image of the golden stars on the burial chamber ceiling remains in your mind, a reminder of the infinite journey that awaits us all. The Nile flows on, timeless and steady, carrying the stories of the past into the dreams of the future. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the silence of the desert and the distant whisper of the river, and you feel the weight of the day drifting away, replaced by the heavy, comforting embrace of sleep. The Pharaoh rests in his house of eternity, and you, too, can now find your rest, safe in the knowledge that the cycle of the sun and the river will always continue. The journey to the west is finished, and the eternal morning is yet to come. The stars above are silent witnesses to the greatness of the past, and as you find your own path to the land of dreams, the spirit of the great king watches over the world, eternal, silent, and at peace. You stand on the banks of the Nile, but the world has changed. The vibrant colors of the new kingdom have softened into the amber hues of a setting sun that has crossed the sky more than 1,000,000 times since the great ancestor was laid to rest. The city of Ramesses, once a shimmering jewel of turquoise and gold, has long since been reclaimed by the earth. Its palaces are now foundations hidden beneath the silt of the river, and the busy markets where soldiers and merchants once bartered are now quiet fields of swaying grass. You feel the weight of these 3,000 years pressing gently against you, like a warm breeze carrying the scent of dried papyrus and old stone. After the passing of the great king, the land of Egypt began a long and slow transformation. The centuries rolled by like the floodwaters of the Nile, sometimes bringing prosperity and other times bringing the quietude of decline. But as the dynasties shifted and foreign empires looked toward the Valley of the Kings, the physical body of Ramesses remained in his hidden chamber, surrounded by the treasures of his long life. Yet, even the most secure tombs were not safe from the passage of time or the desperate hands of those seeking gold. You can imagine the scene late at night, centuries after his burial, when the torches of tomb robbers flickered in the darkness of the valley. The golden masks and jeweled collars were tempted away, and the sanctity of the royal rest was threatened. But history has a way of protecting its most significant sons. You see a group of men moving through the shadows of the limestone cliffs. These are not thieves, but the high priests of a later age, men who still revered the names of the ancient gods and the memory of the great pharaohs. They realized that the valley was no longer a safe sanctuary. In an act of profound devotion, they gathered the mummies of the greatest kings, including Ramesses II, and carried them in the dead of night to a secret location. You follow them as they climb the rugged paths to a hidden shaft at Deir el-Barari. There, in a cramped and unremarkable cavern, the great king was placed alongside his ancestors and his successors. He was stripped of his grand sarcophagus and placed in a simple wooden coffin, his name written in ink upon his linen wrappings so that he would never be forgotten. And there he stayed, in the cool, dry silence of the mountain, for nearly 3,000 years. The world outside changed beyond recognition. Empires rose and fell. The language of the hieroglyphs became a mystery that no living soul could read. The great temples of Abu Simbel were slowly swallowed by the desert sands, until only the tops of the massive heads of the statues peeked out above the dunes, staring blankly into the void of the Sahara. The name Ramesses became a whisper, a legend, a myth associated with a time of giants. People walked over his hidden resting place without ever knowing that the most powerful man on earth lay just a few dozen feet beneath their sandals. Now, you move forward in time to the year 1881. You find yourself in the heat of a summer day, watching a group of explorers and local villagers gathered near the cliffs of Thebes. A secret that had been kept by a single family for years was finally coming to light. When the archaeologists entered that hidden cache, they found a sight that took their breath away. Stacked like cordwood in the darkness were the remains of Egypt's golden age. And there, among them, was the man who had defined an era. When they brought him out into the light of the modern world, something extraordinary happened. As his coffin was carried down to the river to be transported to Cairo, the modern inhabitants of the Nile Valley gathered on the banks. The men fired guns into the air in salute, and the women wailed and covered their heads with dust, performing the same funeral rites that their ancestors had performed 3 millennia before. It was as if the king had died only yesterday. Even after 30 centuries, the people recognized their sovereign. You follow the king to the museum in Cairo, where he finally came to rest under the gaze of science. As you look upon him, you see a man who reached an incredible age for his time. He was nearly 90 years old when he passed, a feat that seemed almost supernatural to his subjects. You can see the strength that remains in his features. His nose is high and aquiline, a trait passed down through the Ramesside line. You see the remains of his hair, which was once thick and likely red, a color associated with the god Set. You see the traces of the ailments he suffered in his old age, the arthritis that must have made his walk stiff and the dental issues that surely caused him pain. These details do not diminish his greatness, they make him real. They remind you that the God King was also a man who felt the heat of the sun and the weariness of the years. In the 1970s, the story of Ramesses took a strange and modern turn. His physical remains were suffering from a fungal growth that threatened to turn him to dust. To save him, he had to be flown to Paris for specialized treatment. You imagine the scene at the airport, a moment of historical surrealism. Because the laws of the time required every person traveling across borders to have identification, the Egyptian government issued a formal passport to the mummy of Ramesses II. Under his occupation, the document simply read King, deceased. When his plane touched down in France, he was greeted with the full military honors usually reserved for a visiting head of state. The Republican Guard stood at attention, and the trumpet sounded for a pharaoh who had been dead for 3,000 years. It was a testament to the fact that his authority had never truly expired. While in Paris, scientists used every tool at their disposal to examine him. They found grains of pepper tucked into his nostrils to preserve the shape of his nose during mummification. They found remnants of the linen that had been soaked in expensive oils. They confirmed his height, standing tall even in death, and they mapped every bone in his body. They were looking at a man who had seen the exodus of peoples, the clash of chariots at Kadesh, and the construction of the greatest monuments the world had ever seen. They were looking at the very face of history. As you return from these thoughts to the present moment, you consider the legacy he left in the minds of those who came after. You might recall the words of poets who wrote about the vanity of kings, describing broken statues in a lonely desert. They used the name Ozymandias, a Greek corruption of one of his throne names, Usamata. They wrote of a pedestal that told the mighty to look upon his works and despair. And yet, when you look at the world today, you see that Ramesses did not fail. His works were not truly swallowed by the sand. The temples of Abu Simbel were moved stone by stone in a feat of modern engineering to save them from the rising waters of the Nile, ensuring they would stand for another few thousand years. His name is known in every corner of the globe. He is the archetype of the pharaoh, the definitive ruler of the ancient world. You realize that his quest for immortality was successful, though perhaps not in the way he originally imagined. It was not just the stone and the gold that preserved him, but the sheer force of his will and the scale of his vision. Every time a child opens a book about Egypt, every time a traveler stands in or before the pylon of a temple, and every time someone like you closes their eyes and imagines the golden age of the Nile, Ramesses lives again. He has become a part of the collective memory of humanity, a landmark in the story of our species. The room where you are now feels quiet and safe, a sanctuary from the frantic pace of the modern world. The echoes of the Bronze Age, the thunder of chariot wheels, and the rhythmic chanting of priests at Luxor all seem to fade into a gentle, rhythmic pulse. You are connected to this vast timeline, a single point in a long and beautiful thread that stretches back to the dawn of civilization. The great king has completed his journey. He has navigated the halls of the afterlife, he has been judged by Osiris, and he has found his place among the imperishable stars. You can feel the coolness of the desert night air as it might have felt in the gardens of Pi Ramesses. The water of the Nile continues its eternal journey toward the sea, carrying with it the stories of the millions who have lived upon its banks. The history of Ramesses is no longer a list of battles or a collection of dates, it is a living presence, a reminder of the enduring nature of the human spirit. You are drifting now, moving further away from the concrete details of the past and into the soft, velvet embrace of sleep. The image of the king remains in your mind, but he is no longer the stern ruler on a throne. He is a guardian of history, a silent watcher who has seen the world turn for 30 centuries. His life was long, his reach was wide, and his rest is well earned. As you let go of the day, you carry with you the strength of the mountains and the peace of the river. The echoes of the past are not loud or intrusive, they are a lullaby, a soft resonance that tells you that you are part of something much larger than yourself. The light of the moon reflects off the quiet waters of the Nile, casting long shadows across the sand. The statues of the kings stand tall, their eyes fixed on the eastern horizon where the sun will inevitably rise again. But for now, it is the time of shadows and dreams. The journey is over, the story is told, and the great king remains as he always wished to be, eternal and at peace. You breathe deeply, feeling the stillness of the room and the comfort of your surroundings. The legacy of Ramesses the Great is now a quiet warmth in your mind, a golden glow that guides you into a deep and restorative slumber. The world is old, the world is vast, and you are safe within its long and storied memory. You are ready to rest, drifting into the silence where the echoes of 3,000 years finally find their home.